Welcome to 31 Days of Horror, everyone. This is Captain. I don't know if you've met him before, but this is my scaredy cat dog. He won't stay and watch horror movies with me. He leaves me alone, huh? You leave me alone. He leaves me alone for me to watch them by myself. Every time there's a scary noise or anything, he's like, "Meh," or scary music, he's like, no, feel the energy, and leaves me. But he's here with me today because today is day 18. My hands are bloody on purpose. And today, I want to take a little break from reviewing horror films. I wanted to do a video that's just dedicated to horror and what horror means to me. Doing these videos, watching all these horror films really has brought me back to my childhood, brought me back to a different kind of joy that I forgot about. And so I wanted to share with you what horror means to me. So this is all an erroneous thought. So if you know me in real life, you might be very surprised that I enjoy horror films as much as I do, because I'm a person that is typically loving life, enjoying life, want to inspire people to live their life to the fullest. A lot of joy. I live my life with a lot of joy. And so it might come as a surprise to you that I enjoy horror films and the horror of it all. I was thinking about this today, and it's on the top of my head. Right now, at this moment, I was going, probably still am, going through depression. Depression looks differently on all of us. We all have ways of coping, ways of getting through things, and depression looks differently on everyone. For me, you may not even realize, and I didn't even really realize it. And then I just got tired of watching all of my sitcoms that I typically watch, and got tired of my reality competitions that I always watch. And decided I need something different. You know, people had been talking about a lot of horror films that came out this year. I was like, oh, I haven't seen a lot of them. So I just started watching some of this year's horror films. That really opened up a whole world to me that I really hadn't thought about watching as I'm going through these funky times. And so I just started watching a bunch of horror films again, and it really brought me out of my depression, or at least that part of my depression, into being a kid again, having joy again. It got me thinking, well, I guess not everyone watches horror films when they were younger, so that's not necessarily a key to them. And my mother and my family all don't watch horror films pretty much across the board. So they didn't even show me horror really or bring horror to me. I had an after school babysitter that I went to after school. She had a son that was that's my age, and we became best friends, and he had older brothers who'd rent horror films, bring them home, and we'd watch them. I remember watching A Nightmare on Elm Street with them. As a little boy, I'd watch horror like this. Sometimes still do, but because it wasn't what was happening on the screen that was terrifying me. It was the noise, it was the sounds, it was that kind of sensory that really would scare me more than anything. So the people and the monsters never really scared me. And I remember watching Nightmare on Elm Street and thinking how cool that is. What a creative idea that your nightmares can get you. And Freddy Krueger, I fell in love with him. I dressed as him for Halloween. I wanted his doll, had his doll. I even had a Nightmare on Elm Street board game my mom randomly brought home to me because she knew how much I loved him. Anyway, so I remember the first two, I think, on VHS at home, and fell in love with all kinds of different horror. And then I wanted to watch all the other stuff, the Friday the 13th, and all the different kinds of slashers. And then I remember I went and saw Nightmare on Elm Street in theaters, and I got to go. My mom let me go, and I went with my best friend and his older brothers. All took us. They were cool brothers who wanted to bring these young 8, 9 year olds to watch Nightmare on Elm Street. And I remember watching the film, you know, doing this, all of this, and being terrified, afraid, but also really enjoying myself. And then I remember coming out of the theater. I can still remember the smell of the theater. This is a vivid memory of mine. I can remember even like they used to have like signs right outside the doors of the theater you'd go in. I can remember the Nightmare on Elm Street logo that was there, all of it. And I remember thinking, you know what's great about horror films is that you always know the movie will end. Eventually the movie will be over and you go back to life. And so that's kind of how I always like lived my life through horror, through the horror films, is and kind of horror in life, that like this is not forever. Eventually the movie will end and there'll be something else. And then I remember thinking, this is me as a little boy, okay, well, what about my movie? What happens when my movie ends? And it got me thinking about death, got me thinking about the afterlife, the possibility that this just might be it. This just might be my only movie, and there's nothing else after this. There's no relief from this. There's no other happier movie to go to, or whatever. I remember thinking, even as a little boy, how terrifying that was. And I started having, maybe when I didn't know then, but maybe a little panic attack inside. And then I learned how to calm my nerves even in that moment and just go, well, then I better enjoy the movie. And that's just kind of how I lived my life from then on. not even really realizing that was the moment. But even when I start thinking about the existential crisis of it all of life, I remind myself that, like, well, I better enjoy the movie. And that's how I watch horror. It's not forever. This thing that I'm watching, if it's terrifying me, it's not forever. Eventually, there'll be another movie I can go watch, and this will be over. So I might as well enjoy the beauty of the horror. So yeah, I wanted to share that with you just in case you're wondering why I love horror so much. That's what horror means to me. What does horror mean to you?